two, one. Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother. Hey, Ima. Good, thank God. All right, so we're going to do a
Hello, how
topic
are
that we
you?
talked about earlier called schools, rules, and automobiles, right? Teens, teenagers,
Schools, rules,
teenagers.
automobiles, and teens.
Yeah, because I
Teens,
know
schools, rules, and
the way we
teens.
grew up
Yes.
over time. I mean, well, it's interesting because you really raised three different generations. You raised Generation X, Millennials, and Generation Z. So, like the style of raising would be very
Mm-hmm.
interesting compared to each one. But you know, like you were more, I would say, liberal with us. It didn't really matter if it was like 2 o'clock in the morning and something happened. We could always call you or call Tati, and we can always go ahead and like make sure that we'll be safe to contact you or come to you with anything personal. Of course, I feel like when it came to religiosity, there was some stringencies that I know I feel like I was a little too scared to talk to you or Tati about because I didn't want to get into any trouble, and that was just from what I saw growing up with my older brother and my older sister and how there were you know fights and whatnot. But like I'm looking at it now, I'm realizing it's all based on the individual. Each person's different. They had their own struggles, they had their
Mm-hmm.
own challenges. So like what I saw was just an outsider looking in, that I was just scared of getting into trouble, so I just wouldn't tell you things that I did when really they really weren't bad. I just didn't want you guys to feel disappointed in me. um but I and
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, for sure.
That was very
Well,
nice of you, actually, to think of us like that.
no, it's
Wait till
honestly
I find out about those things
it
now,
sounds
boy. Am I
silly
going to
because
kill
this is
you?
obviously I am a observant Jewish man and was an observant Jewish boy. So talking to girls was like the biggest like no growing up at the
Mm-hmm.
age of like 13 to like 18. Like you couldn't really talk to girls, you weren't allowed to. So like I would talk to girls, and like I would have certain girls I would talk to, and I wouldn't tell you guys. Like I'd say, well, I'm hanging out with my friends, when really we would go to like some shul, like somewhere behind in the playground there, and just like talk and hang out, and not even like date or hook up or anything like that. Just have a conversation with someone of the opposite sex. It's the funniest thing. That was scandalous. I kept from you. I
Mm-hmm.
kept really quiet because I didn't want to get into trouble. You know.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'm talking about schools, rules, and teens. Okay, the the main thing that you hit on something that um, the number one thing for parents is, first of all, first and foremost, like we were talking about, the tough love attitude of, well, this is my house and you follow my rules. And I'm sorry, I don't care. I've heard therapists, you know, um, I've heard therapists, advise that for parents, and I don't think that's a good way to go. I think the effects of that can be disastrous. I think what you need to do, it's important to have a relationship with your child. That doesn't mean that, oh, if your kid does something wrong, that you ignore it, or if the kid does something wrong, you don't correct them or discipline them in, in some way, some appropriate way, not beat the living daylights out of them, God forbid, but some appropriate way, like losing a privilege or have to gain back a privilege now, or something like that. But if you have a good relationship with your child, if you have an atmosphere that's, again, to say this is my house and you obey my rules, you're creating a very hostile atmosphere in your house for that teen. And your rules should never, ever be a power play. The purpose of any rule should be to keep people safe. And kids are smart. I've seen many schools that have rules that are, my God, so unbelievably ridiculous. And the kids know it. I told you about my high school that I went to, how the second day we were handed a handbook and there was 2 pages of rules, most of which were the most ridiculous things you could ever read in black and white. Like one of the rules was no hand holding or signs of any amorous affection. Oh my God, come on, give me a break. And we also had something, get this, you really pushed my memory the other day when we were talking about rules. Would you believe in our high school and in many high schools in the country, they had in the building staircases designated for going up only and staircases designated for only going down. And if you don't believe me, there was a movie and a book. Well, the movie was made from the
Well,
book.
do you know why?
It was
As an
called
architect,
Up
I
the
know the reason
Down
why they did that.
Staircase. Well, they did it because the baby boom generation, the schools were not ready for the tremendous population of the baby boom generation, and they did that to facilitate, basic traffic. But the problem was, wait a minute, I got 2 minutes to get to my next class. It's on the next floor, and my classroom is right next to the down staircase. So if I could only go up the down staircase, I will be right there at my classroom in time. On the other hand, if I've got to follow the rules, it means I got to go to the other side of the building and
Yeah.
go up
Well,
the
I
up
was trying.
staircase,
What I was going to say
which will
was, yeah,
make
as
me
an
late for
architectural
class.
designer, I had school, um, and classes that we talked about the population growth, and how baby boomers, there were so many baby boomers that really the schools were used to just smaller population, that they weren't expecting it, and they had to like manage it. And nowadays with school design is its own like issues that they have with, like, I think technology. I don't know, I haven't really caught up that much with educational design recently, but I know that people have been critiquing it. um but yeah, back to what you're saying with teenagers. I think that, like, and this is just coming from experience, I think some people forget what it was like to be a teenager, and then they just get really scared. Like, there's this song from My Chemical Romance, and the line goes, teenagers scare the living shit out of me. They can care less as long as someone will bleed. So darken your clothes and strike a violin pose. Maybe they'll leave you alone, but not me. And like, it, I think it really speaks strongly to like a lot of parents, teachers, and just adults, where they're scared of people that are the youths, as some people would call them. They're scared of young people because, say what you want about being 18, 21, I don't know, I really believe in the idea that girls become adults really at the age of 12, and boys really become adults at the age of 13, where they really start thinking for themselves, they start coming up with their own opinions, and they start making a name for themselves and making a way for themselves. You know, it's it's not the like official end, because there's been
Mm-hmm.
plenty of like glow ups where, you have like some kids who are a little shy, a little focused more on the books, not so jockey, but like they are a little nerdy or whatnot. And then after high school and once they go to college, they start like finding themselves. But like, that's just like the second wave of finding yourself. I think the first part of finding yourself is really discovering who you are when you just start having hormones, when your body just starts changing, when you really start discovering a voice. It's not the end all be all. And I'm pretty sure like I know I'm different at the age of 30 compared to at the age of 20. Like there's this tremendous, growth that I've been through, that I've learned, that I've developed. And I think, like, I think I'm running on a little bit of a tangent here, but that's what I'm saying before, and is that like that you have these teachers and principals, and they're trying to like conduct some form of like military camp, as if like that's the best and only way to do things. And for some people, you squeeze them too hard, they'll snap. And it's really like my school, they were trying to compete against a very strict, very yeshivish, very religious school that was like, a couple miles away. They were trying to get more people to come to their school. So what do? They just copy the rules, and they try to compete against this other school, which is kind of ridiculous because you have your own identity. You should go on to what sells. Like the school was originally a very modern. The word is yeshivish, but I'm trying to find a good English terminology. I guess it was more focused on secularism in religiosity comparatively to just only religiosity and very minimal secularism.
Well, it was a religious school, but it was a little more
Yeah,
liberal
okay.
than
I'm trying to
your
find the right way to
straight
explain it.
yeshivish type.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked that balance. I mean, they had a basketball team. In fact, I remember they even had a band. You know, that some boys got together, and I thought that was a really good balance at the time too. I think, quite honestly, you hit on something which quite honestly, I the years that you kids were in school, I was in a constant fight almost with the administrations about what I felt were rules that went above and beyond just, the safety of the children, that would just, like they expected you young people who were full of energy, um, to be little sadikim and be content to sit behind your books for 12 hours a day. I mean, come on. I said, these are young, these are young guys. These are young, active, healthy guys. I said, you need to give them an outlet. There should be music. There should be gym. There should be art, put on maybe a drama. I said, what kind of creative outlet are you giving these boys? All you do is you put them in this pressure cooker from early in the morning to late at night with a schedule that many adults probably wouldn't be able to deal with. And then when fights break out or there's discipline problems, oh, you blame it on the child. He needs to go to a psychologist. And in fact, I even discussed the situation with a very prominent psychologist in our community. And she was in total agreement. She said that she also had fights with some of these, religious school administrations on this very matter. And whenever you would question some of their rules, call them up and question some of their rules and ask them, now, does this make sense? And how constructive is this? You could never get a really good, um, constructive answer from them. It was always, well, that's the way it is. Or they would give you some excuse that just did not make sense at all. And like I said, it goes back to what we first said, that young, you said teenagers are really young adults. They really are. And they can sense when a rule is really for the benefit of safety for everybody and when it's just thrown in there as a power play. A rule should never ever be a power play. A rule has got to make sense, or you're not going to have command the respect of your student body. And also, I wanted to go on to, remember we touched on the idea of curfews, because that's a very big problem among many parents with their teenagers. And this, like I said, years ago, I heard some of these like tough love psychologists on the radio telling parents that if your child comes home past curfew, you just lock the door and don't let him in or her in, or tell them to sleep somewhere else. Well, there have been some situations where that kind of advice led to fatalities, actually, like really disastrous, horrible situations. The best thing to do as far as curfew goes is the purpose of a curfew is to keep your child safe, because let's face it, the later you're out in the middle of the night, the higher the probability is of falling into the hands of the bad guys. So what you need to do is you need to sit down with your teen. If they come home, break curfew, they come in late. And sometimes they have a very legitimate reason. Sometimes they got lost. That happened to me once. I came home late because I got lost. And my mother, you got really mad at me and smacked me. I tried to explain to her, I got lost. And in those days, there were no cell phones at all. You got lost, forget it. You know what I mean? You were really, boy, you could be lost for hours. Um, you know, or maybe, we're all human. And, sometimes we go to a party or a get together, we talk, we get interested in the conversation, we lose track of the time. Even adults lose track of the time. So the thing to do is when if they come home late from curfew, and when you open up the door and they come in, say to them, thank God, I'm glad you're home safe. Now go to bed. We'll discuss this in the morning. And the next day, you should sit down with them and just tell them, listen, I love you very much. You mean everything to me. God forbid if anything were to happen to you, I could never laugh again. I could never smile again. Now, let's you and I sit down. Let's think of a plan. Again, we're going back to the solution orientation. Let's think of a plan. And you can even tell them that you as an adult would never, ever be out, say past like 1:30, 2 o'clock at the most, because you as an adult know that past that time, the chances of you falling into some sort of danger is, way more. And you as an adult wouldn't do that. Even though in some American cities, you probably wouldn't go out at any time of the night and day. But that's besides the point. So, and then the next day, sit down with your child and say, work out a plan. Would it help if I call you at 1 o'clock in the morning and tell you, hey, I think you ought to start heading home? And then when they come home, you tell them when they're in front of the house, please call you so you can open the door and watch them. It's very, very important. I'm not kidding. I don't care how old they are. Watch them getting in from their car into the house. Because in a lot of, and it's very sad, in a lot of situations, there are a lot of people who, have been harmed or murdered just getting out of their car and getting into the house. So you want to watch them. You want to be there on the porch and make sure they get into the house safely. And
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's the best bet.
I want to also talk about what I mentioned before. Now, you raised 3 generations. Can you kind of focus on, like, I guess, the style of parenting that at the time was used and how it developed from Gen X, millennials to Gen Z?
When I first started parenting my children, I was still well, I was still of the, as far as like hitting was concerned, I never liked the idea of hitting as a first disciplinary tactic. But when I saw that nothing else was working, then I always kept that on the table. I let I let you kids know when you were little. Teenagers, you can't hit teenagers. You really can't. I'm sorry, you cannot hit a teenager. They're an adult. You can't hit them, and you
Like,
should.
emotionally manipulate.
There are other things you can do. But as young children, yeah, right, that's true. So, but like a lot of times, what worked very effectively were behavior mod charts. That was great. That was worked very well, where you have an actual chart. You get so many points, and if you get a certain number of points, we go to the dollar store, and you get to pick what you want, and that worked tremendously. Behavior mod charts are very, very good. There's also now I'm talking about normal kids. Normal. Now I've seen some kids though. Every now and then, you will get a child who something is just with that child, and no amount of timeouts. I've seen not this is not the norm, by the way. Normal kids will be fine with a behavior mod chart, a timeout, a stern look, a privilege removed, or privilege granted if they get a certain number of points, or they do, like their reaction to something. You did this nicely, praise. Most kids will be fine with that. But every now and then you get some kid who, boy, it's like such a chutzpahdik mouth, like something just bit this kid. This kid is out of control, and no amount of anything else is working with this kid. What might work with a child like that is holding them very firmly by the shoulders, looking in their face, and if they make some sort of chutzpahdik remark, call you a name, whatever, you don't talk to me like that. Usually like a very threatening look. That should work. But if nothing else works, I hate to say it, not a hard,
Wait, what's a medium slap?
I would say like a slap. A medium slap would be quick, not too hard, but just hard enough to get the message across. Like a slap across the mouth or across the face, like a medium slap, and say no, like shock therapy. You might say, no, you're not talking to me like that. In fact, you might even, before you take that, you might warn them. You go, look, if this behavior doesn't stop, nothing else is working. I'm going to have to
Like,
resort
look,
to
Tony,
smacking
I'm just
you.
gonna
And I don't
say,
think you
like, we
want
can
that.
break your fucking legs so we can talk about it. Yeah.
But I'll tell you something funny that happened with, I don't know, I forgot which one of your brothers or sisters it was. One of them was like 15 years old, and the 15 kids are looking very, very forward to getting their learner's permits, to getting their driver's license, and all that. So one of your brothers and sisters was opening up a very clipspeedic mouth to me. I kept my cool and I said, "What's that you say? You don't think you want to drive until you're 21? Great, I can go for that." And they go, "What?" I go, "Yeah, that's exactly what you said, wasn't it?" They go, they got the message, and they go, "Okay,
Oh
okay, I'm
wow.
sorry, I'm sorry."
Yeah. No. So, I'm not satisfied with this answer. I really want to know, like, was there really a difference between Gen X, millennials, or Gen Y, or there really isn't anything, and it's just life?
I think
Uh,
the difference was in me. I think as I got older, I developed better parenting skills. I became more patient. Um, I saw, as you kids were growing up, like, with the first child, the problem with the first child, everything is so new, everything is so different. Like the first time your oldest sister, when she was real little, about 3 or 4 years old, kids do this all the time when they're about 3 or 4 years old. They want to get their way, and the parents won't let them have their way, so they'll go, "I hate you." All kids do that when they're little like that. So when she first did that, I had never, I was an inexperienced parent. I'd never heard anything like that before. I just burst into tears. I started crying. I felt so bad. My child told me she hates me. Oh, then um, when the same situation happened, like about a year or two later, and she said, "I hate you." By that time, I developed more experience as a parent and realized, hey, all this is emotional blackmail. All kids use it. And I smiled at her and said, "You are entitled to your feelings, but you still have to pick
oh,
up
that's
all your
awesome.
toys."
That is awesome.
She was not happy
Okay,
with that.
well, this is time. We did a great run. I love you, Ema, and God willing, we'll touch base soon enough. All right.
Okay, honey. All right, love
Okay, all
you.
right. That's it.
And
End of the show.
all right.
Thank you guys for listening.
Love you, honey.
All right, bye. Bye bye.